Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
I am doing fantastic, and I am excited to share everything I know, or as much as possible what I know. I am great, and I can't wait to talk all about this, minus the furries. So my audience was sort of into YouTube and was really enjoying what I was doing with some videos, and some videos they weren't behind. And what was fascinating for me is that I don't know how many people are YouTubers out there, but YouTube is a very hard land. And it's a very difficult thing where very few people make it to the top. And a lot of people wind up being kind of maybe middle ground at best. And middle ground for me is maybe you're getting 100,000 views a year on YouTube, which isn't a lot. And what I was finding was that I was making videos, seeing where it was going to go. My audience partially was liking it, and then other things were missing. And then what wound up happening to me later on, about maybe 6-7 months, people got away from all the reviews that were silly and didn't provide any information and weren't analyzing anything, said, hey, this is really good. We like what you're doing. Can you do more of these videos? And so that's what was going on with me on YouTube really all throughout 2012. And around that time, there was this anime called Attack on Titan that came out. And every once in a while with anime, there's a show like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, where people just stop and drop everything. That's changed, in which that a lot of guys, since Sailor Moon had a reboot with Sailor Moon Crystal, a lot of guys are into it. And I was one of those guys that was doing reviews on Sailor Moon Crystal, and I got a lot of views for it because a lot of people in 2018, I think that, I don't mean to get political, but there's a lot more flexibility in what, boys and girls can do now. And so a lot of guys were into Sailor Moon because they're like, oh man, this is actually a really good show. And it's actually quite a violent show if you look at it. So it's very interesting, and it's really not what it used to be. And the animation is beautiful on the reboot, and so a lot of people, just as a fan base, were just appreciating, saying this is really good anime, and this is really a good story. And they kind of took out all the BS with it, and they actually restored it to what it originally was. There's something about cousins for those who know the ins of the original. They kind of treated that appropriately and took that out, and they didn't have to be so. They got to be honest in the reboot, and so a lot of people appreciated that. And so what I was saying about Attack on Titan, about YouTube, was that one of the things that was going on with Attack on Titan is that people would legitimately stay home on Saturday nights and watch this show and then make videos. And people were getting 50, 60, 70,000 plays within hours, and I was getting a lot as well. And I was getting tons of plays with this video, and it wasn't because it was good. I was just giving my opinion, analyzing, giving a review, and I was getting like 3,000, 4,000 plays out of nowhere. (2012) going into 2013, maybe a little bit before that, but really during that time period. So it really wasn't a lot of money, even though I was getting a lot of views. I mean, I was getting all the way up to I mean, I'm going to spoil it because we're heading in this direction anyways. I got demonetized off YouTube. So all the way up to that, I was getting maybe $200, $300, even with all that. And maybe I had 25,000 plays at that point. That was collective. So not a lot of money. Not a lot of money. Maybe a little bit more, but still in that range. I wasn't breaking like 1,000. And so this is what I mean by YouTube being such a tough market, is that right now I am still on YouTube and I'm not making any money off of YouTube, and I have 100,000 plays or views. I'm in podcasting language right now. Views is the correct term. And even with 100,000 views, you're still not going to make much money. And this is what I mean by it's such a tough market. And the reason why is that for those who don't know how YouTube works, is that you get a fraction of a penny per view. Very much. Everybody knows the song Happy by Pharrell Williams. Pharrell Williams' song was downloaded, it was streamed, I should say, 40,000 times. Happy was in 1 month, and he made about $2,700 off of that, which is nothing. That's insane. That's what one of his hats costs. Algorithm. So to talk about that, and I hate to get political, but I think I'm not going to pick a side, but I'm going to kind of explain what's going on, where there are conservatives, and the biggest one, and Joe Rogan too, Dave Rubin. You know, I think Joe Rogan, for those who know who he is, he's pretty straight down the road. Dave Rubin is a pretty straight down the road guy, and they're talking about controversial topics, and he's interviewing somebody. It's a civil conversation. There is nothing wrong with having a disagreement or having a conversation about something controversial. And YouTube said, we're going to demonetize you. We don't like what you're talking about. And I mean, this is a recent phenomenon in the last 2 years. And so that's something that is occurring. There are topics. Joe Rogan just had Jordan Peterson on talking about 12 steps how to live a good life. That video in his podcast on YouTube got demonetized. How is that controversial? PewDiePie. PewDiePie. So my next move was I stayed on YouTube because I had no idea what to do, and I was saying to myself, you know what it is, because I didn't get kicked off of YouTube. I want to make that clear. So my videos are still up, and to piggyback off of that, for one of the things that I want to say is that about YouTube is that it is still a great medium, even if you're not able to monetize on it, where it's a great medium to get your products out. And so that's what I use YouTube for now. I make maybe 1 or 2 videos a month talking about comic book investing and some other things that are my passions and what I enjoy. And I actually put up my podcast episodes on YouTube as well. And so I use YouTube as a medium to market myself versus to monetize myself. And so after I got kicked off, I said, I want to go and create a website. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. But then eventually, after a while, you see other people creating things. You say, I'm going to go create a website. And so I went out, created a WordPress blog, more or less. And then I just started writing about anime and comics, primarily a little bit of wrestling. And following that, I then had to research affiliate links, how affiliate links work, how affiliate link marketing works, how Click PMs work. And from there, that's what really started. And I love anime. I've been an anime fan since I was like 5 years old. I got into comics when I was 12, reading things I probably shouldn't have been reading. Reading John Goff's run on the Teen Titans is not meant for a 12-year-old. I could tell you that. And my parents didn't know what I was reading. They bought it for me. I turned out perfect in many ways, and it worked out beautifully for me. And so I was reading that, but I wasn't collecting comic books. And then I took what I was doing on YouTube, and I decided to bring it to a website. And then I put some affiliate links marketing in there, some Amazon click stuff. So the way Amazon affiliates works to really monetize yourself that way is through your first 7 sales, I believe, are at 6% or at 4%. And the next 6 are at 6%. And then you go all the way up till I think you get to like 50, and then you're at, I think, 12 or 15%. Electronics have a specific percentage. Yes and no. It's a complicated question because on YouTube you're passively monetizing under their old system, because I don't know what their new system is because I'm excluded. But with the website, you have more control of what you can monetize, and you can also monetize yourself as well, because what you're doing is that you're building a brand. If you write well and you throw good products up there. And I also have other links up there as well, because what I found is that Amazon sometimes doesn't offer the best products. There are other stores out there, and there are other things. There's Click Merchants. I forget the exact website, but they have, I think, like 2,000 different stores, everything from sporting stores, and they offer different percentages. And so there's an anime cosplay store, and I'm writing about a cosplay thing. I'm going to put their stuff up there because if you need a wig and you're developing a cosplay, and why would I want to sell you, a DVD of an anime when that's not what you need? And so that's because YouTube tries to match up people with things, and they try to use cookies, and we're not going to get into all that because I don't fully understand that. But when you're using a website, you get to actually pick and choose. And if you're good at it, you can truly hit home runs, and you don't have to sell 100 products or 100 affiliate links. You could sell like 3, because if somebody needs all their cosplay supplies, they might be purchasing a $300 purchase. And if you're getting a 7% affiliate commission on that, that's $21, just like that. It really doesn't, because unfortunately, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not dependable, because it's really hard, because clicks do work and they bring in money, but I've had to lay out a lot of money up front. So I'm doing YouTube videos, and my YouTube videos, typically what I do is, what I'm really focusing on YouTube is, because this is my next big project, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to all come out. But I'm big into comic book investing, and I'm big into providing a lot of information about that. And so I make videos talking about Stan Lee, are his autographs worth it, doing cost analysis and things like that. I do autographs you should pick up, books you should pick up, who you should be looking for, what's hot, what's not on YouTube, those types of things, because that's my next big project, is doing something along that, whether it's a paid newsletter with that, or whether it's, just more articles relating to that, or it's something in that space. So that's something that I'm doing on YouTube right now a lot. And then following that, I write about anime, comic books. I developed a thing called The Good, the Bad, the Verdict, where I give what's good about a book, I give what's bad about a book, and I give the verdict. And I try to be as honest as possible. And I've made some enemies of people who are not happy with how I reviewed their book, because I was honest about it. And I know that they're not happy with me, because they said they're not happy with me on Twitter publicly. But I think it's important, if somebody writes a bad book, they should be known. I'm not just unjustifiably criticizing. And then following that with the website, I'm also podcasting a lot. And right now I'm taking both. I love running my podcast, because my podcast is tied to my interests. So it's the Pop Anime Comics Lounge, and I'm going to explain it because it's fun. So I developed a interview-based podcast where I interview voice actors from anime and cartoons, and a lot of the voice actors that I try to interview are from my childhood. So I've interviewed several people from Pokemon, a few people from Yu-Gi-Oh!, and then I interview people that I watch now with anime. I also, on my podcast, interview comic writers and artists, and I interview professional wrestlers, and I interview cosplayers. And so what I've come to the conclusion is that wrestling is a gigantic cartoon with real live people beating the crap out of each other, and their storylines. And if you actually break it down, comic books are the exact same thing, where you have Batman beating up the Joker. Maybe there's a little bit more complicated things, and maybe they're in a city and they're not in a ring, and maybe that's not what's going on. But there's a story arc here. He's a constant heel. Everything's wrestling. Everything is wrestling. And then anime is the same thing, where there's a story, because those three things, what they do in a wrestling ring, the athleticism is real. People get hurt. Kurt Angle has neck issues. John Cena's had 4 neck surgeries. Those aren't jokes. I mean, those are serious. And while in a comic book you don't see Batman having a neck surgery in real life, I know the person who did that and came up with that. He was on my podcast, who broke Batman's back and created Bane. Bane was created by Chuck Dixon. And so, yeah, it's really weird. I mean, I'll tell what winds up happening. I just shoot cold emails out. And so there's people like Paul Levitz, who is the former president of DC Comics. There's people like Denny O'Neil. He's sort of responsible for killing Jason Todd. For those who are comic fans, those are significant events. Chuck Dixon broke Batman's back. And what's bizarre is that people who are not as well known tend to be the most difficult, where they think they're bigger and better than everybody else. And then people like Chuck Dixon and people like Denny O'Neil, people like Paul Levitz, are like, yeah, I'll be happy to do it. Why wouldn't I do it? This sounds great. And it's really bizarre. And the best advice I can give to people when asking an interview is a lot of people who are famous, people are intimidated to talk to them. And it's bizarre because why should you be intimidated to talk to your favorite comic writer and say, hey, would you like to be on my show? Chances are that you have a 50% chance they're going to say yes. Every once in a while, I have somebody who is rude to me. And in whatever reason, I don't know why, but they just snap. They had a bad day, and they're difficult. I had an issue where the guy wanted to be paid, and I don't pay for interviews. I don't think anybody should. That's not what you're here for if you're an interview-based podcast. And he shot me a message. Within 20 minutes, he said, I thought so. And he was just really nasty, belligerent to me. He didn't give me any time to respond. And what I've come out of that is instead of being discouraged, I said, you know what? I'm going to get 15 more people. I'm going to make you regret that you said no and that you were rude to me. Not by attacking you, not by bringing it up to anybody, but by making my show successful. So live public speaking is interesting. I mean, I think that I public speak a lot. I try to do anywhere from 12 to 16 panels at anime and Comic Cons on a variety of topics. And I think my public speaking really came from the fact that I was doing so much work on YouTube. When you log in 300 hours worth of videos on YouTube, you become very comfortable in front of at least a camera. And then that, it's like any muscle. If you spoke 300 hours on YouTube and people are commenting, even though you're not dealing with people in person, which is a very different ballgame, and then you go into podcasting from that, you're probably going to have better mic skills than somebody who just jumped into the podcast. And even when I started podcasting, if you go and listen to my first episode, you can tell that I don't have as much confidence. You could tell that my questions aren't as refined. You could tell that I'm not, it's a little bit rougher and it's a bit more choppy. And then after 80 plus episodes, I'm now so much more confident. I now know how to handle an interview. So somebody says something, there was episode 39 of my podcast. I love talking about it with this woman named Santine Phoenix. She brought up something very, very adult, very personal, very somewhat, I wouldn't say controversial, but a serious topic. And this is how we first started the podcast off. And if that was my first podcast, I would have had no idea how to handle it. But since I was 38 episodes in and this was 39, and maybe this was a year and a half ago, I knew how to properly handle it because you get better and better and better the more you do something. So having said all that, when I public speak, the same thing occurred when I'm in front of a live audience. My first panel, because there's two sides to when I do a panel, which is my public speaking, my live public speaking. I have a PowerPoint, and so I have notes in front of me, I have slides in front of me, I have a PowerPoint, and so the combination of those two things is very interesting, where my PowerPoint wasn't great, and so I had to redefine my PowerPoint and redefine my public speaking in conjunction with that. And then after a few of those, I developed this panel called Exploring Dystopia through Attack on Titan, The Walking Dead, and Fahrenheit 451. And I just hit the home run in like the bottom of the ninth with it, where it was the PowerPoint was perfect, my speech was perfect, and I had an audience that was just into it. And it was a filled audience. And when you have 250 people in an audience, and this is your fourth or fifth time you're public speaking at a con, and somehow you're just in the zone because you understand exactly your topic. And it was perfect. And from then on, I just knew that I'm a good public speaker, and I think that boosts the podcast, and the podcast boosts my public speaking. And I think the two go really well together because the more you do something, and the person who I'm going to quote is Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, when he was young, he was public speaking 2-3 times a week. And he had colleagues who were only public speaking twice a month. Who do you think got better as a public speaker? I don't think I'm going to be there for a while, and I'm not too sure if I want to be there because I don't know if Comic-Con is going to be sustainable in the next 10 years. And the reason why I say that is I think we're moving to a virtual world. We're moving to a faster technology world. I personally don't want to leave my house. And if I don't have to leave my house, the only reason why I go to a Comic-Con is I want to get stuff signed and I want to get stuff graded. And I view it as an investment for myself when I get comic books graded. And what I think is going to happen is I think we're going to have virtual cons soon enough. And I think they're just going to attract better talent. I think people are going to just feel better about it. I think it's going to be cheaper. And I think you could attend like 15 virtual cons and you're going to pay a fraction of the price. And I think you're going to be more satisfied as a fan because you're going to have so much more content and you're going to have everything at your disposal with VR. And I think that's what ultimately is going to happen. And so I think as far as I'm concerned with me is I want to eventually take my website and I'm going to keep the podcast will always be free. That's something I want to make clear to everybody. And the website will always be free. My public speaking, as long as I'm public speaking, I live stream that stuff on YouTube and not YouTube, I'm sorry, Facebook Live. I prefer that because it's cool. I like the concept of that. But where I'm eventually going to go is I want to build a paid site. And So I'm going to use an example, and I hate to pick a political side, but I think he does the best example of this. There's a guy named Ben Shapiro, and he has a website called The Daily Wire. The way The Daily Wire works is that it's a paid subscription. I think it's $8 or $10 a month, and it's obviously conservative, but you get a bunch of content with their website, and they do all right. And when they get demonetized on YouTube, they don't really care anymore. And we're going to start seeing that a lot more. And this is what I want to talk about with YouTube, is that what is ultimately going to happen, and we could look at Dave Rubin as well if we want to take more of a middle down the road. Dave Rubin is in the top 5 Patreon raisers. He raises approximately $32,000 every month from his fans. And so while I would love to raise that money, and I don't have that fan base because I'm still paying my dues. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Eventually, I could take the Patreon route. I could go out, build a paid site where, it's $5 a month, or maybe it's $40 for the year. And you can do that too, but I feel like the paid site is a more aggressive step, where you develop really good content. Or what you do is that you build a paywall, and now if you're doing like 30 panels a year and you're live streaming them, now all your fans have access to that on your paid wall, and they have unlimited access to it. And so, and then maybe it's $2 a month. And so there's a lot of different ways on how to do that. There's also a lot of different things where you could have paid newsletters. So to move beyond the anime world, and if you're a podcaster who talks about finances, a lot of people, what they do is they have a podcast to advertise their newsletter. And I've seen this done multiple times, and it's very effective, where this is an extremely cheap marketing play. If you're offering people advice on a podcast, and then you have a newsletter saying, hey, I can recommend you the top 5 stocks to buy every week, and, check it out. That's what people do. They do it with real estate, and the list goes on and on and on. And so ultimately, probably at some point, whether this podcast, website, public speaking leads to being an economic sustainable business, or it leads to another project, which it can. And I have a few things up in my head that I'm cooking that deal with comic books, such as possibly building out a comic book paid newsletter. My podcast will now be an excellent tool because I've networked. I have a social media following. It's not large, but I now have at least a jump on that to then go and say, hey, I could throw an advertisement for my own product up front, or I could throw it in the middle or at the end. Sure. So my YouTube is Pop Anime Comics. My Google Plus is Pop Anime Comics. I'm not on that all that much. I have a Facebook page. It's called Pop Anime Comics. My Twitter is at Pop Anime Comics. My DMs are open, so feel free to shoot me a DM. I do respond. I also do respond to every comment on YouTube. So if you have a question relating to a video, I'm more than happy to answer. I have an Instagram. My Instagram is full of fun stuff. I don't really put much about the podcast, but I put a lot of cool comic stuff up there, a lot of cool stuff signed. So my Instagram is Pop Anime Comics. My website is popanimecomics.com. And you can email me at my business email, which is andrew@popanimecomics.com. One of the things that I would love to say for anybody who wants to start a podcast, find a name and then get everything that you possibly can with your name. I have a Pinterest. I have a Tumblr with my name on it. I go out. I probably have another 13 or 14 social media sites that aren't big. I think there's like Hummingbird is one of them, which I don't know if you've ever heard of. But I don't know if it's big. I don't know what the hell it is, actually. But I signed up my name on it because, God forbid, it becomes the next biggest thing. I want it. I want it. And if some people, I know people who, I have friends who are podcasters, what they do is that they get things like Twitter accounts and Facebook pages that are similar to their name so that nobody else can take it as well. And so that's something to keep in mind. Is get everything that you possibly can across it and spend some time thinking about your name. Please. That's my biggest advice to everybody. If you're going to start or you're going to rebrand, definitely spend a day or two minimally thinking about what you're going to choose for your name. Just do it. I mean, my podcast story is I didn't start out as a podcast. I started out sharing audio files. That was the purpose of what I was doing. And I had no idea what a podcast was. I had no idea that a podcast existed. I just thought that. I mean, this was maybe 3 months before I started my first episode of my podcast. So I did 4 interviews that you could say they're not the dark ages because they weren't bad. But the whole point was that I thought people, because I was doing written interviews first, and I thought people didn't want to read an interview. I thought it was kind of no flavor. You know, when you and me are speaking, people are hearing this, you know, there's a flavor here. And also, you know, perfect example is that I play video games and I listen to podcasts. So my first 4 episodes were not a podcast. They were just interviews. There's a little bit of banter, but I had no idea what I was doing. And then I jumped in and had to learn all this stuff. And so sometimes in life you have to do that. Sometimes you can't say, I'm going to go do a podcast. Maybe you say, hey, you know, I'm going to do an interview on YouTube and see how it's consumed first. And that's perfectly fine. If you want to test your theory, I recommend test your theory, because once you start doing it, you're going to figure out if you want to do this and you're not fully committed. And it's a really good thing to do. No, I do video games. What do you mean by that? Let me. You know what? It's weird. I just got back into gaming, where I got back in. I've been playing a lot of Overwatch, and I just got back in. And part of why I got into Overwatch is I did the Torn Bolt character. I've interviewed his voice actor, and so that kind of brought me a little bit in. And I just bought myself last November an Xbox One X, and I took a 10-year hiatus from video games, and so I left for a while, and that's why I don't really talk about video games, because I just came back in. I'm still fresh. I'm about 6 months into this, and I love playing. I like interviewing people, so a lot of voice actors are in video games too. But as far as I don't love it enough to have a conversation about it, and there's so many other people who are more knowledgeable than me, and I just don't want to step on their toes, and this is my little niche. But it makes sense, and there is definitely a correlation. The 4 things that intersect, and then cosplay is in the middle, because cosplay goes across everything. It's comic books definitely intersect with video games, especially with like Fallout and Overwatch. Their entire game stories are being told through comic books. Then we have anime intersects, because anime is based in manga, and manga is Japan's the #1 comic seller in the world. Manga is just Japanese comics. And then professional wrestling is in those story arcs, and it's similar to comic books, where there is that realm of story and structure that's being played. And then video games just touch upon, have an animation style, have a comic book story style, and those things intersect. And in fact, the thing that which is really interesting, which really confirms my theory, is that for about 6 months, there's a company called Crunchyroll. And Crunchyroll is an anime streaming service. And WWE has their own network. And so for $30 for 3 months, you could get both services in a crossover. And the New Day, which is were those who were kind of promoting it and were doing all the ads for it in conjunction. And the reason being is that Crunchyroll identified and WWE identified that anime fans like wrestling and that there is a big enough market that they'll give. So the WWE Network is $10 a month and Crunchyroll's like $6 a month. And they're giving away for 3 months for $30 for both because they were betting there's going to be a retention rate for one or both. And from what I've seen in the data, there is a retention rate for both of those. For people who like wrestling, like anime, it was way before that trend. I appreciate it. Any interview I get to do is a pleasure, and I love sharing my story, and I really hope that people join me. I want somebody to produce a better podcast than me because that's going to make me respond to be better than that.